Hi there. Hope you're doing really well and that you'll have a nice weekend coming up here. We have open class here, of course. As usual, nothing is medical advice, just general thoughts and comments. And I actually have a drop-in class for the self-coaching program. So I'm a little bit ambitious here, thinking that we'll get through this open class in about 20 minutes. But I think it will happen because I took a look at the questions and I think it's pretty realistic. So let's take a look. Let me share my screen here. And the first question we have is from someone who would like to remain anonymous. Let's read this. Hi, Daniel. I first want to say thank you so much for being here day after day, anytime. My pleasure. Your talks and books have been very helpful and inspiring for me. While I'm seeing some progress on nights when I have no plans the next day, I'm still having problems with hyperarousal and therefore insomnia on the nights before I do have activities planned the next day. These plans can be anything normal, from fun to a little more demanding. Before my insomnia started, I never had problems looking forward to being a little apprehensive about whatever I had going on the next day. I would look forward to having something to do, and I would usually sleep fine. But now, anything planned for the next day seems to bother me during the preceding night. How can I reassure myself during the night when these nervous feelings are keeping me awake? I'm really trying to live my life despite my sleep issues, as you and Sasha Stevens, whose book I also have, suggest. But that means making plans, which seem to really scare me because I can't be sure I'll be rested enough to feel very well. Any thoughts or recommendations? Absolutely. Anonymous. I will say that the two things that really stand out to me here is, firstly, that you're here sharing your thoughts and have a question, which is amazing. You read my book, you read Sasha Stevens' book. Those have been helpful. That is thanks to you being, willing to learn and contextualize what you learned there, which is great. And also, it seems like, what bothers you now is when you have something scheduled the following day. And when you don't, there's no struggle. That's also amazing. That shows that, when there's nothing, again, it just shows that when there's no fear, then, sleep happens all by itself. Now, of course, you're in a very, very typical spot, which is that generally speaking, when things are kind of like regular, things are fine. But when there's something extra the following day, then there's some more pressure, some more anxiety, etc. It's very typical. Very often what happens is somebody starts doing well kind of night on a regular night, but then when they're going to travel and when they have something planned, then there's a little bit more struggle. So how do we meet this? Well, first of all, again, acknowledge or see that you've learned so much that's been helpful. Give yourself a big pat on the back, and also see that, for anyone who, every human being who has something big the following day, whether they're anxious about that or just excited about that, will sleep less. When a kid is super excited about Christmas, right? They hardly can sleep. That's totally normal, and just demystifies that we sleep less when there's something happening the following day. That's helpful to know. Also helpful to know that when you've had trouble sleeping, this sort of normal reduction in sleep becomes sort of amplified because that's fear in the background. Now the question becomes like, how do I reassure myself? And that's a really big one to me, because often when we reassure ourselves, that's basically us trying to make ourselves feel different. You're kind of like, I'm scared, I'm anxious. What can I tell myself to feel less anxious? How can I reassure myself? But you see, when you're doing this, you're trying to not feel anxious. You're trying to teach the brain that being anxious is not something I want. I don't want that feeling. I don't want to feel anxious. And when we do that, we're sort of teaching the brain that being anxious is not good. It's bad. We want to get away from it. We need to escape it. We're kind of teaching our brain that a feeling, which is just a signal, it's just a feeling, is like a threat. And so then it becomes more sticky. So the key here is actually to sort of go the opposite direction and be like, okay, I have something tomorrow night. I'm feeling stressed and anxious about it. And then be like, but that's totally normal. I don't need to reassure myself. It's completely expected for me to feel this way, and just sit with that emotion. And also, and you can also do some detective work and see that, in the past, I've been stressed and anxious and I've slept little, but I still did things that I enjoyed. I still did meaningful things during the day. So I don't need to sleep a certain amount to have a good day. That is super helpful. And that goes to the last thing you said there about, it was something, let's actually read this so we can see exactly the wording here. It said, which seems to really scare me because I can't be sure I'll be rested enough to feel very well. And when I said that, when I saw that, I said, nobody's sure that they will feel very well the following day. Nobody can do anything to be sure of that. But what we can do is sort of go towards, even if I don't feel very rested, even if I don't feel very well, I can still have an okay day. I can still do meaningful things. I can still live my values, do the things that's, again, bring purpose to me. And then when we go towards that, when there's no pressure to sleep or pressure to feel less anxious, then everything just becomes easier and easier. The path becomes easier. So the desire for control is what gets us to some trouble. But when we see that nobody has control and we can go towards being okay with that, okayness with that, things get much easier. Hope that helped, Anonymous, and thanks so much for all the support. And just send a message again if there are any follow-up questions. Now, Bibita wonders, can you please someday talk in general about the relation of vitamin D with sleep? And of course, absolutely. And the way I think of it is the following: that this is the same question as somebody may ask about, can you please talk about serotonin and sleep? Can you talk about diet and sleep? Can you talk about ashwagandha and sleep? Can you talk about melatonin and sleep? And so the question is, do these things have any impact on our sleep or not? And should we avoid them, or should we use them or something like that? Actually, if we get a live comment here that I just want to bring in right away. Jake says, my anxiety has eased a lot thanks to your advice. Nothing more liberating than delegating your sleep. Can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough, Jake, for always being supportive and on all the channels. I know your Instagram, you're supporting us everywhere. And so thank you, Jake, for all the support. And super glad to hear this, by the way. And yeah, okay, so the question is, what really determines how much we sleep or how well we sleep, right? And as most of you on this channel know, it's really gas and break, right? The more sleepy you are, meaning the longer you've been awake, the more sleep drive there is. That's kind of a prerequisite for sleep to happen, but it's not that important because we really all have enough sleep drive, unless you're doing something very, very unusual. So unusual meaning like you sleep all through the day, then there's no sleep drive at night. Sure, that's true, but generally speaking, sleep drive is a prerequisite, but it's not important. But so if we have sleep drive, what else is there? Well, there's hyperarousal when we're anxious or stressed, worried, etc. That can sort of block sleep from happening. That's gas and break. If there is some gas and no break, sleep will happen. If there's a lot of break and gas, the sleep will probably not happen, etc., etc. Now the question becomes, okay, back to vitamin D. What about vitamin D? Can it have some impact on sleep drive or hyperarousal directly without us thinking about the vitamin D in itself? Maybe, maybe if you did this big randomized study and people got either vitamin D or no vitamin D, you would see that those people who got it slept 1 minute less. That could happen. There could be some direct impact, or they slept 30 minutes more or something like that. Maybe there could be. It's the same thing with the melatonin or ashwagandha or anything, right? Those things can have some direct impact on sleep, but does it matter? I don't think so. Not at all. Now, does how we think about it matter? Oh, yes, absolutely. If you think I have to get vitamin D to sleep, then it will have big impact. If you think I have to avoid vitamin D to get good sleep, then it has big impact. So all these things in themselves have minimal impact, but how we think of them can have a big impact. So that's my answer really to the vitamin D question. And it's the same answer to all these other things that we ponder and wonder. So the formula I use is really X isn't a problem, but thinking about it can be, and you can kind of plug all kinds of things into that X. All right, now let's move on to Nelly here, who says, on the app, do you implement sleep restriction? And I think my answer to that is no, definitely not, because I think that the whole idea that you should push yourself to stay up late so that you're really sleepy, so that you sleep, etc., is very flawed, leads to a lot of pressure and performance anxiety. But I do use what I call a timeless sleep window, which can look the same, but the intent is the complete opposite. So what I encourage is that you get up about the same time every morning, maybe around 6, let's say, and then you kind of stop checking the time at maybe 10. You have that timeless period, and that's not to kind of make yourself sleepy. Completely opposite. It's to kind of like a gentle nudge towards like letting go, that I believe is the way. So it can look like there's some sleep restriction, but it isn't. It's completely, the intent is the complete opposite. And I do have that timeless sleep window in the app, which is BedTyme. And I think, and Nelly, by the way, if you hear this, I think you already joined the program today. So I think we already talked about this within the app. All right, so finally here we have Ibraheem, who says, I'm reaching out to you as I'm recently suddenly suffering from anxiety, sleep anxiety for about 2 weeks. Friday night going to Saturday I was tired, took 2 melatonin gummies. I passed out a little after 11, woke up at 1, distraught and anxious. The day felt crappy. I was exhausted, but I was thinking about the next night and that I would sleep well. The next night was a nightmare. I didn't sleep at all. Ended up going to the ER. My dad took me. They ran tests, gave me lorazepam. That night after taking it, I slept for 12 hours. The next 2 nights were followed by trying to avoid it, caving in, sleeping for 2-3 hours due to my circadian rhythm being off. The next night I smoked weed, slept like a baby. This method didn't work for the next 2 days. I went to the doctor. They gave me Divigo, which is a sleeping pill. I had very good dreams. I felt crappy. I kept trying to force myself to sleep. I slept about 5 hours today. I have been taking trazodone for 2 days. The second day today, I was better. I slept for 7 hours. I'm trying to not care about sleep and train the reasoning part of my brain to ignore the subconscious worry. Any tips, tricks, or anything you can provide me would help greatly. As after I'm done with the meds, I don't want it to be poor sleep again. Also, I'm an overthinker, so it doesn't help. Did I catastrophize a normal bout of acute insomnia? I get heartburn, and maybe that contributes. Just a little lost. Ibraheem, thanks for sharing this. And there's so much here that is, I think, really important. Firstly, did I catastrophize? You could say like, you could say yes. You could say like, yes, you catastrophize, but that can come off as a little bit like judgy, like when I'm catastrophizing. Why do I catastrophize? It's completely normal, and we all do these things, right? We all, something happens, and then we kind of like think a lot about it, and we try to fix it, and it gets, it doesn't get any better, and then we all do that. So yes, but nothing to be hard on yourself for. Just be super kind to yourself. Now, I think some things that I think could really help here is like the element of tracking is so palpable in this message, right? I don't know how many mentions of time there were, or how, like, there were so many mentions of this time. There were a lot of mentions of 2 nights, 1 night. There was 12 hours, there was 1 hour, there was 0 hours. And this just shows that there's so much attention, so much focus on like what's happening and trying to control it and keep track of it. And when you see that it's the trying to have control that actually leads to a lot of struggle, then you can like gently kind of move away from that and do the thing maybe where you're like, get up at the same time every morning, stop checking the time maybe 8 hours before that or something like that, and just make the time timeless. Do things you enjoy during the night, even if it's difficult, like do something meaningful, purposeful, teach the brain that there's nothing to be afraid of, and use wakefulness at night to teach the brain that there's no danger in that, there's no harm in that. That's kind of number one. Number two, which goes along with this, is that whenever you're trying to escape being awake at night or any like perceived threat, anything you think is dangerous, you're teaching the brain that there's something to be dangerous about. So when you take a new medication, initially the brain thinks like, oh good, this will take care of sleep for me. I escaped the threat, I escaped it. But then you're still like, the brain's still like, but did I really escape? What really happened there? Maybe there is a threat. And then it stops working because you no longer believe it does anything. Then you smoke some weed, and then that feels like, oh, I got this. I got control now. This is going to take care of sleep for me. You sleep well, but then the next night you're like, let me do it again. Oh no, maybe it won't work. Oh no, it didn't work. Oh no. So you see, it's all like, whenever you're trying to escape a threat, that just gets you confused, and you don't see that sleep always happens by itself. When you delegate sleep, like Jake mentioned before, when you smoke some weed or you take a tablet or take a pill or something, and you think this is going to take care of sleep for me, I don't have to try sleeping. That thought, the act of delegating, that helps you sleep, but not the chemicals inside whatever you take. And that's a real moment of clarity, like for Jake, like when you see that, oh, it isn't these things that seem to help, that I thought made me sleep. It was just me not trying, me letting go, that really helped. And, Ibraheem, I would just say, like, it's been 2 weeks. I think one thing that really helps you is that I imagine that it's fairly clear for you to see that I'm the same human being with the same brain, living on the same planet, breathing the same air as 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or a year ago. There's nothing different, except there's some fear, there's some fear of being awake, and when you teach the brain that being awake is is really nothing dangerous that really helps. So I hope this helps, and just staying on the channel, learning some more, I think can really, really help as well. All right. So I'll end there and head over to drop-in class here with 7 minutes to spare. So I hope this still brought a lot of value, even if it was pretty short. And I want to thank everyone for sending questions, and hope you have a really nice weekend. All right. Bye for now.